Yeah, everything Naira said, for sure. And I guess I was starting out because of this conference, which I have to hand it to you. This is great. You guys have done a great job organizing this conference. We've been to a lot of bad ones that haven't been as well organized. So this is great, and it's so exciting to see all of your faces. This is really, really cool. I haven't seen this since San Diego, so it's nice to be back amongst, some scholars. So, yeah, so I, like Mary mentioned, I was born and raised in Flint, and probably unlike most of these people here, I'm pretty old. So I lived through some times when the freeway was built through Flint, which was built through the predominantly African American middle class neighborhoods and businesses, the St. John's neighborhood. Until recently, and I'm living all this as a 10-year-old, right, or about that age. As an elementary school teacher, or as school student. And I didn't realize it until after Andrew Highsmith wrote his dissertation and a book that's out of the University of Texas, I believe, called Demolition Means Progress. And then all of a sudden I read the history of what I'd been living through. Now I was pretty angry and upset, even as a young child, like witnessing the deindustrialization, the segregation, just the destruction, and I knew it even as a young age. Now, after reading his book, I realized that 1973, in spite of all deliberate speed, Flint school system was still highly segregated. I knew that as a child. I could see it. I actually was part of a magnet school, so mine was a little bit more diverse than most. But in 1973, the federal government decided that the school system, that we weren't doing good enough in terms of integrating the school system. So, they were like, you better get your act together or, you're gonna lose your funding. At which point, speaking of the nonprofit industrial complex that Naira referred to, we have two major nonprofits, the C.S. Mott Foundation and the Ruth Mott Foundation, which a lot of people, oh God, without the Mott Foundation, what would Flint do? We're so thankful. Oh, they just have saved our city. And it's a complete crock of shit. In 1973, when they were compelled, they'd been a big supporter of the Flint community school system financially. And this was supposed to be, the great community school system, right? The flagship for the nation. But Flint, Michigan, that was where community schools originated, and we were gonna show everybody how it was done. And it was supposed to be great, except what you don't realize is that it was highly segregated. So, Mott was putting a lot of money into the school system, as long as it was separate but equal kind of thing. So he was kind of reinforcing, it's like, I had no idea. And then in 1973, he pulled his funding because, with the federal government demanding that we do a little bit better. And at that point, the school system started to decline quite a lot. I kind of saw it growing up, but then when you look at someone who's done dissertation research and researched a book, and you see all this documentation, he's done all this stuff, it's like, wow. And you could see, like, from 1973 on, the school system just started, getting to the point that it was at. So at one point, my family was part of the white flight to the suburbs. We moved to Grand Blanc, where I ended up graduating from high school. And since my parents were Flint community school teachers, I was kind of like, in Flint at that time, either you went into the military or you went to college, because there was, it was in the 70s or early 80s, the jobs were starting to decline and all that kind of stuff. So, my parents being school teachers, it was always like, you're going to college, you're going to college. Now, before Reagan and Bush wrecked the Pell Grants and all the college funding that we used to have, I was lucky. I got into all these colleges, all these amazing colleges, and going to a small private liberal arts college ended up being cheaper than going to Michigan State or the University of Michigan. So I was fortunate enough to go to Smith College, which was amazing. It was awful and amazing, just like it was like trial by fire. And it pulled this Flint girl out of a lot of things a lot of preconceptions that I had had growing up in Flint. It got me through a lot of isms that I'd previously been sort of immersed in. So I decided to study sociology. Smith at that time, and I'm not sure what U of M is like now, but we didn't have any prerequisites or requirements. You just took classes, you kind of studied whatever the hell you wanted, and everything sort of fit together, and you decided on a major, and you took art and literature and theology, and it all was like, okay, it was a true liberal arts education, something that the University of Michigan Flint claims to be supportive of, but in honesty, there's no liberal arts education at all, nothing. They're talking about getting rid of the foreign language department. I don't understand what that's about. So I took sociology, and of course that's where my social justice lens it didn't originate there, but it kind of reinforced some of the things that I'd experienced growing up. It gave me an explanation for what I was so angry about growing up in my childhood. And it also was a good sociology. I don't know if there's any sociologists in here, and there are social scientists in here. It was cultural sociology. It was that, that actually looked at people, that cared about people. Because right now we're getting a lot of new hires in the University of Michigan Flint in our sociology, anthropology, and criminal justice department. And there's nothing wrong with criminal justice except the way that it's starting. It's more like job training for cops and border patrol agents than it is like an actual analysis of criminology and the school to prison pipeline, right? So I'm in this department with people who are doing statistics, and they don't have a social justice lens. But back when I was in undergraduate, it was amazing. We were talking about ideas. We were talking about social justice before it was called that. We were talking about white privilege before it was called that. At that time. I still identify myself as queer, although my 15-year-old daughter says, no, you're pan. You're pan. That's what the name is nowadays for it. So we were like embracing all of these things, all of these movements that were going on. So I went straight into graduate school in 1989. And at that time, the University of California, San Diego was really good for cultural sociology. We had Joe Gusfield and Bennett Berger and some other people there. Unfortunately, there was a huge war between the faculty. You guys are you kind of know how awful graduate school can be. There was fist fights in the hallway, mail was being stolen. It was really bad. I was in a cohort of 17. I was the only woman. There were 17 of us, none of us finished. And most people dropped out within the first or second year. The graduate students got in the middle of faculty that were fighting between cultural sociology and comparative historical, statistic, macro sociology. And for some reason to them it was either or, it had to be one or the other, and the cultural sociologists had to go. So even then I kind of have that residual experience at the University of Michigan Flint, because there's no cultural sociology. I don't even know what it is, to be honest. So I can't even teach one of my areas of specialty, which is cultural anthropology. That's one of the things that, gosh, it's been so long. What do you call it when you go ABD, right? When you've got your 3 areas that you've got to test for or whatever.
Concentration?
Yeah, concentration. I do my orals, right? And that was one of the areas. And so now I can't even teach that because I don't have a degree in it or whatever. Okay, so that's a long story short. I ended up teaching at the University of California, San Diego, because back then, you could do it with a master's, or you could do it ABD, and there wasn't the McDonaldization of the adjunct faculty. There were still tenure-track jobs. You had a couple of adjuncts, but they were kind of like me. And at that point, things started to privatize. In the 90s, when I was a graduate student, I was part of the grad student union, we were working hard just to unionize, just to be recognized as a union. We were part of the UAW, and we couldn't get recognized by the regents. And I know you know what the relationship with the regents is, because you have your own to contend with, and they're pretty horrible. But at the time, University of California was, again, it was that public school. If you got a certain grade in high school, then you were guaranteed to go to one of the UC schools. And it was maybe $800–900 to go, you know, because it was supposed to be accessible, affordable, free, that kind of thing. And every single year, starting when I went there, the fees, because they couldn't raise tuition, the fees went up between 300 and 700% every single year. And the fees were starting to pay for, you know, just, we call it, there was this price center that was the new student center. We had this lovely old student center in a eucalyptus grove that was all cooperatives. We had a bike co-op, we had a food co-op, and it was amazing. And they shut that down. Just one day they decided to, you know, shut it down, and we had to occupy it for several months and actually like live in the food co-ops for a while so they wouldn't shut it down. And they ended up opening this other student center that's now the dominant student center. It's called the Price Center. We call it the High Price Center. It has a Barnes & Noble, Taco Bell, that kind of stuff. Now, I did belong to a political collective. It was called Groundwork Books and Community Resource Center. It still sort of exists. I'm really proud of it. It was started in 1973, and that too was part of my social justice sort of training. It was amazing. It had analyzed the university, and it was a socialist political collective. We had training in terms of how to make consensus decision making, and it was just amazing. And at that point, we paid everybody a living wage in the 90s. $15 an hour was what the going rate was.